If you're a fan of the band Def Leppard, especially the early days, I think you're going to enjoy this video. What I have here is an article that was written back in 1981, just a few months after High and Dry came out. And they were in, it looks like Wisconsin. They're about to play a concert, and somebody wrote a little article about them. And I personally think that the best thing that they ever put out was High and Dry. I've got one of my copies here, High and Dry. This one happens to be the one where they ruined Bringing on the Heartbreak. And those of you that are Def Leppard fans will know exactly what I'm talking about. They remixed it later and added some keyboards to it to make it sound a little bit more like what they had done with Pyromania. And I think they kind of damaged it, the song. Anyway, it's a whole nother thing. In my opinion, though, this was the best music that they ever put out. And just so many things on this album are great. Let It Go, another hit and run's great. High and Dry is a great song. Bring It On. I mean, it just go down the list. This thing is just an unbelievable album. And it had a real kind of straight ahead, raw rock and roll, almost an AC/DC flavor to it. I mean, you listen to something like Let It Go, and you can hear it. It had a little bit of an AC/DC flair. High and Dry definitely had an AC/DC flair in the guitar hook. And of course, Robert Mutt Lange, who produced this, also is known for producing AC/DC. So you can imagine there was a little bit of tie in there. But this was just an amazing, amazing record. I just loved this thing. I didn't see them until the next tour, which was Pyromania, which was also a great album. I just think that, and that's the one I discovered them on. I think for most people that were really into Def Leppard, that's the one that we found them, because that's the one that had Photograph. That's the one that had Rock of Ages. It was also, I mean, it also had a ton of great songs like Foolin', and it was awesome. But I still think this one was just better. And so anyway, what I wanted to do here is read you this article, because especially if you like Def Leppard, and around this period, it's really interesting to listen to what was going on and what they were thinking, because they really were starting to break through here. Because this was their second album. They had another album right before this called On Through the Night. And interestingly, and I don't think this has ever really been answered, but this album has the song On Through the Night on it, High and Dry, where the album On Through the Night didn't have On Through the Night on it. It's just kind of an interesting thing that I don't know that's ever really been officially explained why they did it that way. And if somebody out there knows something I don't, I would love to hear the answer to that question, because there's a lot of speculation, but I don't know that anybody's ever really answered it. Maybe they have, and I just have missed it over the years. But okay, so for those of you that are watching rather than just listening, you'll see there's this out of this newspaper. This is the Wisconsin State Journal, October 21st, 1981. High and Dry came out in July of 1981. So again, this is the few months later. They're on tour for High and Dry. And the picture, of course, you'll see there from left to right, you've got Steve Clark, Rick Allen. Rick Allen's the drummer. He's the one that famously lost his arm a few years later. Joe Elliott there, Rick Savage. And then Pete Willis over on the far right there. And Pete Willis was on High and Dry, but he was replaced, of course, on the next album by somebody named Phil Collen, not Phil Collins, Phil Collen. And he's the one that played guitar on Pyromania, and he actually is still with Def Leppard. Okay, so let's see here. So the title of this article is Def Leppard Happy in the Fast Lane. And here we go. Too much too soon is an axiom that has frequently been applied to skyrocketing heavy rockers Def Leppard, although lead singer Joe Elliott agrees that the past 3 years has been a case of very much, very fast. He's quick to state that it's nothing the youthful band can't handle. Since playing their first gig in July of 1978, the Sheffield, England-bred quintet has recorded 2 LPs for Polygram Records and toured England and America, opening for the likes of Pat Travers, Ted Nugent, the Scorpions, and Judas Priest. Currently, Def Leppard is covering the U.S. coast to coast in support of Southern rockers Blackfoot. That is a name from the past. I've got a couple of Blackfoot albums in the other room, but it's so interesting thinking about these bands that used to tour together. I mean, just this whole thing opening up for Pat Travers and Ted Nugent. When I saw Def Leppard on the Pyromania tour, they were opening up for Billy Squier, and they were playing an arena. I mean, it was a 18,000 seat arena. And anyway, just interesting though, just thinking back to this stuff. Southern, let's see here, in support of Southern rockers Blackfoot, an assault that will bring the band to the Dane County Coliseum tonight. And then the subhead says debut album climbs. Quote, a lot of people said that this was going to be too much too soon because we're so young, Elliott said in a phone interview from Kansas City. At 22, he is the eldest of the group. Drummer Rick Allen, whose brother is the band's tour manager, is the youngest at a tender 17. Quote, but we were aware that could happen, he continued. So you go out of your way to make sure it doesn't. The debut album, On Through the Night, was a blockbuster introduction to Def Leppard's catchy heavy metal sound and shot to the top 50, entrenching the band as fledgling commanders of the rock brigade, in quotes. And by the way, they say rock brigade, that's one of the songs off of the first album. That was one of the songs that made them popular. With production by AC/DC veteran Mutt Lange, the record displayed a raw energy coupled with the tight performance of seasoned pros. It also smacked of some familiar flavors. Quote, I think that Led Zeppelin is probably one of the biggest influences on us, Elliott revealed. Zeppelin and Queen, and possibly bands like UFO and Thin Lizzy, for the commerciality of their music. We've always liked commercial hard rock, something that's got a hook to it, that isn't just noise and riffs and wails. Leppard began by playing commercial British metal covers, but scarcely had a half dozen live performances under their collective belt when releasing a self-financed EP. Quote, we pressed up 1,000 copies and sent them around to radio stations and rock press, said Elliott, and it sold out in just a couple of weeks. So we pressed up another 17,000, and those were gone in about 3 months. A few months later, we signed up with Phonogram, unquote. This whirlwind affair with a major label has brought some flack from their mates who are still struggling on the Anglo club circuit. Quote, we took shortcuts, sure, but that's what any band would do under the same circumstances, Elliott stated firmly with a colorful accent. A lot of bands are jealous of us because they've been doing it for 12 years and never got a break. The fact is that we got it, and that's just our good fortune. The fact that it was a lot of good timing and good luck, whatever, none of that's any good unless you're writing good songs, unquote. And that's the truth. The reality of Def Leppard is that the music was just great. They just wrote really cool songs. This album is filled with them. Pyromania is filled with them. And then Hysteria, which I know I get in trouble for saying this, but I didn't really like Hysteria that much. It was so poppy, and it just didn't do it for me. I was expecting something so different. But hey, it was their biggest selling album by far. You know, it put them on the map in ways nothing else ever had. And again, why was it so successful? Man, those songs were so catchy. You don't have to like them, but they really were just commercially viable. They were so he's right about that. You know, you can put in tons and tons of work and whatever, but the reality of it is Def Leppard just wrote good tunes. The newest LP, High and Dry, is not only chock full of good songs, but shows diversity on Leppard's part in addition to refining their blazing style. Steve Clark and Pete Willis team up to produce some scathing hybrid guitar licks with an instinctive sense for the heavy metal mainstream. The power rhythm backing from bassist Rick Savage and drummer Allen melds the group into a musical alloy strong enough to stand the test of time and sharp enough to carve the group a niche in the hardest of rock hearts. Completed in 6 weeks, High and Dry was something of a chore for vocalist and lyric writer Elliott. Quote, I personally have a strange feeling about studios. I'd like to like them, but I don't. It's very clinical, like going to the dentist and there's no atmosphere, he lamented. I enjoyed the finished album, but not so much making one. I much prefer playing live, unquote. And then subhead, Learning the Hard Way. Touring with Blackfoot is providing Def Leppard the opportunity to strut their stuff before crowds that might not otherwise tune into their brand of metallics. The advantage is that it's not a totally one-sided show like if they were opening for Zeppelin or AC/DC, where all the music would sound pretty similar, Elliott said. The disadvantage is that with Blackfoot getting their Southern rock audience, sometimes our music doesn't go down very well, unquote. From the rapid-fire pace of Let It Go to the deliberate stomp of Bringing On the Heartbreak, Def Leppard's Madison show should come off like molten lead poured over polished granite. Lack of experience in the professional arena is a significant factor in the development of Leppard's aggressive approach. Quote, I didn't think that it would happen this fast, Elliott confessed, but I did always think that the band would be successful. You've got to have that attitude, or you'll never get anywhere anyway. I agree that other bands have had time to evolve and grow up in small clubs. We're making our mistakes in front of thousands of people, but I still wouldn't have wanted it any other way, unquote. And to be honest, and I know I've said this on this channel before, because I think we've done a couple of Def Leppard videos before. I've seen them several times in concert. I saw them all the way back at the Pyromania tour. Saw them on Hysteria when they did it in the round. Seen them since. I've never thought they were a great live band. They're good, but they don't have that energy and the whatever the thing is. But their music is just great. It just is. And so even though he says they're making the mistakes in front of all these people and they're learning the hard way, I just don't know that they ever really, really became just this spectacular live band. Now, people will argue with me about that. When I saw them, I was 13, 14 years old when I saw them opening up for Billy Squier. And even though everybody there bought Def Leppard shirts because they were coming, they were getting big at that. Photograph was getting huge. They were starting to really, really take off with Pyromania. So everybody was excited about Def Leppard and not so much about Billy Squier anymore. But even at that tender age, as a young teenager at that concert, and even though I bought a Def Leppard t-shirt, I remember by the end of the night after Billy Squier thinking to myself, he was better. Just something about his stage presence. He had that X factor, that charisma on stage, and he commanded the place better than Def Leppard did. And I still hold to that, because then when I saw Def Leppard, even on the Hysteria tour, when they were the biggest band in the world, I just, they were fine. I liked them. I'm glad I went. But I don't know that they ever really became the great, I just can't wait to see them, just so much awesome X Factor energy live. For me personally. But set that aside, this was amazing. This is one of the best albums to come out of the 1980s, period. And so I'd really love to get your feedback on that too. Did you think that? How was this one, if you're a Def Leppard fan, how was this one compared to the others? What did you think of it? Where did Pyromania and Hysteria fall in the pecking order for you? And or even On Through the Night, which which we didn't talk a lot about here, but they had a couple of cool songs off of that album that did okay. And so anyway, what did you think about those things? And did you see, actually, if you saw them on this tour back in these days, like when they're opening up for Nugent and Blackfoot and Pat Travers, if you saw them, what was that like? Love to hear your concert stories. We get so many cool concert stories on this channel, people leaving notes about what it was like seeing some of these bands. It's amazing listening to people telling us their Led Zeppelin stories and their Black Sabbath stories. And we're going to, in a month or two, start putting some videos out where we read some of these stories because they're just so good. And if you haven't, I highly encourage you, go look at some of the other videos on this channel. Whether you watch the video or not, I want you to watch the video, but just read what people have to say. Go find some of the concert stories that people have put down in some of these, and they're so, so interesting. Especially for me, because so many of the things we talk about on this channel happened before I was paying attention to anything. I was too young. And so now reading what people experienced, it's pretty interesting to read. So anyway, please follow the channel, like the video. Love to get your feedback on any and all these things. What'd you think of this article and what they had to say, and how much do you relate to the stuff that was being said? And also, you probably know other people that are interested in this kind of thing. If you are, if you're part of a Def Leppard group, or just if you have friends, just send it off to them. They'd probably enjoy seeing this thing too. And so, as always, with that, have yourself fantastic day.